In today's video, we have all kinds of NHL news and rumors around the NHL. Today's rumor mill focusing on Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs, some potential trades we may see coming up here in the short term, plus lots of other news around the league, including a grievance filed against the Flyers for the termination of Ryan Johansen's contract. We have some serious injury situations brewing in a few teams already, including Doughty. The Los Angeles Kings appear to be suffering a major injury last night. Also, some updates around Anaheim and Montreal in that regard. We have a new captain in Buffalo, and the first bit of news from the waiver wire this preseason. A lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here today. Things are starting to pick up when it comes to injuries. We get news from the waiver wire, which is only going to intensify here in the coming days. But first, I want to talk about the news from the NHLPA today. They announced that they've officially filed a grievance on behalf of Ryan Johansen against the Philadelphia Flyers, who of course put him through unconditional waivers earlier to terminate his contract. Of course, Johansen claims that he is legit injured. The Flyers obviously are calling him on that, saying that they're not completely sold and buying him on that. Of course, we know when he was acquired last year, he immediately went from playing to saying, yeah, I'm hurt and I can't play. And it just kind of looked a little bit suspicious. Maybe, he was dealing with an injury and was willing to play through it if he stayed in Colorado. And if not so much. I don't know. Obviously, all we know is that the Flyers terminated him. He's claiming that it was not legit. They haven't done anything with the cap space they've gained from obviously the termination of the contract. So at this point, I think they're probably play it safe and not do a lot with it until they know the outcome of this, because it could affect their cap availability. So clearly at this point, maybe they settle outside of going to an arbitrator. We'll have to see how things go, but it is possible that the NHL does offer some sort of penalty against the Flyers for this situation. Doesn't mean they will, though. I mean, if they have all their information lined up and all their proof or whatever they have, then it may not get to that. But a grievance has definitely been filed now, which is not really a big surprise. Updates on the injury front. One that just actually happened a short time ago. It looks like William Nylander went down with the Leafs tonight. He was skating into the offensive zone and he got pushed with the stick by Nick Robertson, and we're going to talk about Robertson here in a few minutes, but which was weird. I mean, it's a preseason. I know sometimes you see players behind them give each other like a push if they need, to get to the bench quicker or something like that. It's just an odd scenario. And then, of course, Nylander lost his balance, went down to the ice, and it looked like his head made contact with the Habs player's leg. So he's didn't come back out for the second period, and he is listed as out for the rest of the night. They're calling it precautionary. Could be the same idea what we saw with Ridley Gregg in Ottawa the other night. They just want to take their chances. Obviously, if he's showing any symptoms whatsoever of potential concussion, they're not going to mess around with that, especially in a game that means nothing. So obviously, at this point, we'll have to monitor that situation. I know Matthews was, I think, dealing with something as well. I don't think it's anything serious, though. So certainly you don't want to see injuries piling up early on. One that was another serious injury last night. We saw Kings top defenseman Doughty go down, and it did not look good at all. Doughty they were playing against Vegas. He was battling against his old teammate Tanner Pearson, and they were going in down the wall, and he got tangled up with Pearson and just kind of went in really awkwardly and went in kind of feet first, basically, and it was not looking good. You could tell he was in a heap of pain. Needed some assistance. Right now, the early reports are indicating that it looks like a fractured ankle, but there is, some, I guess, more imaging being done to see if there's any other damage, because there could be, ligament damage or anything else in there. So we don't know the full extent of it. It was just a quick X-ray. They're going to have more detailed imaging done, and I imagine the next day we'll probably know a little bit better, but. Certainly not looking good for Doughty. I would suspect at this point he's definitely going to be out to start the year. It's just a matter of how long at this point. Guys recovering include Caden Gooley in Montreal. We know right around the time training camps were opening that he had to have an appendectomy done, had his appendix removed. I think it was either right before camp or right at the beginning of it. So he's starting to skate again, which is good news. Generally speaking, you're going to be out for at least a few weeks, usually 2 to 3 weeks minimum, for that type of surgery. You can certainly start to ramp up your activity slowly, but before you're into full contact and everything is a normal recovery time, because we're also seeing today that Ducks goaltender John Gibson also had the same thing last night. He had emergency appendectomy to have his appendix removed, and they're saying he's 3 to 6 weeks. So 3 weeks is not an uncommon recovery time for that surgery for athletes. So I suspect he'll likely be closer to the 3 than the 6, but you never know. Everybody recovers a little bit differently, and also where he's obviously in a different position too, right? Having pucks fired at him might be different movements and everything than a skater. So we'll see how those recoveries go, but certainly not the news you're hoping for. In case the goalie thinks some positiveness there, but otherwise, you don't want to see injuries piling up in the preseason. As I mentioned, we also got some waiver wire news today. It's the first of the preseason, and it's only going to pick up here as teams start to make more and more cuts, and a lot of these players need waivers to go to the minors. So there's going to be a ton of waiver activity as the next couple of days pick up and cuts really start ramping up here, and into between over the weekend and into next week, it's going to be busy. But the Canucks have 2 players on waivers. Jet Wu and Guillaume Brisebois are both looking to be assigned to the AHL franchise in Abbotsford, and they need waivers to go there. So I would suspect at this point neither player is likely going to get picked up. They probably can be cleared and be reassigned, but like I said, we'll have to wait out 24 hours to find out this tomorrow afternoon and kind of go from there. But the waiver activity is going to pick up substantially. The Buffalo Sabres announced their new leadership group, including a brand new captain today. Of course, the Sabres are over in Europe for the Global Series right now, getting ready to do battle to New Jersey Devils. There are a couple of games coming up in Prague. I think the club that's going to be over there is over there for like 11 or 12 days. They actually have a preseason game against the Senators tonight, which is actually one of the worst hockey games I've ever seen in my life. Terrible game. Both teams have a pretty young, inexperienced roster. Even the Sens have a couple of vets in there, but the Sabres couldn't even meet the requirements for the experience that's necessary to be in preseason games because of their group going over to Europe. So they had to get an exception from the NHL on that. But yeah, the Sabres, some of the Sabres players are actually playing pretty good. It was the debut of Linus Ullmark tonight in Ottawa. He had a fantastic showing, gave up 1 goal on, I can't remember how many shots he had. I think it was around 30 in only half a game. That's how terrible defensively it was. Just to give you an idea, in case you haven't watched that game, but the Sabres, like I said, main groups over in Europe, and announced Rasmus Dahlin as the team's next captain. So, of course, he was a first overall pick. At the time, was kind of viewed upon as being a generational type defenseman. I'm not quite sure that he's reached that level, but he's certainly a really, really good defenseman. Fair to call him an elite level defenseman, one of the tops in the NHL, and I think they made a good decision here. They also named 4 players that are going to be alternate captains this year, so 4 A's. I don't know if they'll alternate 2 at home, 2 on the road or something like that, but you get Alex Tuck, Tage Thompson. Then you also have Matthias Samuelsson and Dylan Cousins, all going to be wearing A's for the Sabres coming this year. But new captain Rasmus Dahlin, I think it makes sense. He's, arguably amongst their younger group, which is a big part of their team. He signed long term. He's a big part of the franchise. First overall pick. Leads the team in many aspects. So makes a lot of sense that he would be their guy. So I think they made a good choice. I thought they might go with Alex Tuck maybe, but I guess Dahlin is certainly an excellent choice here, in my opinion, as well. Aaron Dell, we know he was cut from his PTO with the San Jose Sharks past, I think, day or two, but he has now signed, but this time it's an AHL-only deal, still with the Sharks. He's going to play with the San Jose Barracuda this year, so he's got an AHL-only deal, so he won't be eligible to be called up because he doesn't have an NHL two-way contract. But with the goaltending depth in San Jose after they picked up Askarov and they have Mackenzie Blackwood and Vanacek, unlikely that they're really going to need him at that level anyway. So we'll see how that goes. As I mentioned, some of the trade talk around the NHL. Let's start first with the Maple Leafs. As I mentioned, Nick Robertson was unfortunately kind of part of a play that led to a William Nylander injury tonight. And I want to take a look at an article from the Toronto Sun from writer Terry Koshin. Terry writes that he feels that Nick Robertson might end up getting traded here after all. And there was a lot of NHL reporters that went on to say right after he signed his contract, after a lengthy, I don't want to call it a holdout, but stalemate or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, they went a long time where it wasn't looking like he was going to sign. He finally caved and signed a 1-year deal, came back to Toronto to go to training camp. And so far, it just hasn't really been, I think you could fair to say, not super impressive. Not like he's been terrible, but he hasn't been great either. The preseason game he played the other night against Ottawa, he was held off the score sheet. I think he had 2 shots on goal, and to be honest, he wasn't really all that noticeable. Meanwhile, when Pacioretty played in the preseason, he had a couple of goals and was kind of all over the place, had the puck a lot. Like, he just was a lot more noticeable out there. And, Robertson, as it's mentioned here in the article, as much as he had a good year last year, I think he was frustrated with the being moved all around, in and out of the lineup, just wants some consistency, which you can understand, but he's not doing himself any favors here. They brought in enough players, and what they already had and what they've brought in besides Robertson, there's some pretty healthy competition going on. Some other young players on the team, plus you get McMahon, you get Pacioretty, obviously it's not quite clear exactly who's all going to be in their top 2 and 3 lines. There's some moving parts there. And you could see an opportunity for him to kind of solidify himself, and that he could easily have played his way into it. And it doesn't mean he won't. The preseason's not over. They still have some games left, and I'm sure he's going to get a few more looks here to kind of make his case, so to speak. But what Terry Koshin's writing is that he thinks that Robertson's value is high enough that he would probably be plucked off of waivers for sure, but yet not necessarily high enough at this point in the offseason to say he's going to make this Leafs roster for certainty, right? So he feels that the Leafs, if they're not sure, if that maybe they don't put him on waivers, but maybe a trade is more likely here. Knowing that when time comes, if they have to put him on waivers, they're going to lose him, and they won't get anything in return for him. So I guess we'll see how things go. They don't have to make a decision yet. There's time. There's more preseason games. It just hasn't been an amazing, look for him. He needed to really come into camp and really just, I think, take advantage of the opportunity. The game against Ottawa the other night when he played, he had, he was playing with really good line mates too. So, and then had an opportunity tonight too. So, I mean, it's not like it's been terrible, but it hasn't been great. He's got lots of competition there. And, it makes sense that they would try to trade him as opposed to losing him on waivers if they feel like he may not make the team, because he does have some value. So we're going to have to watch that situation as training camps get a little bit further along. Be interesting to see what other moves the Leafs make. Will they keep him up just because they don't want to lose him if other players that have more options and flexibility? You can say the same thing about Easton Cowan. So far, and I know the Leafs are playing tonight. I only seen a few highlights. Haven't had a chance to watch that in its entirety yet. But I know that, Cowan's another player. Hasn't been super impressive. Hasn't been terrible, but just not sticking out as being a guy when you're watching, you go, man, how can they not keep this guy? That's what you want them to think, and they haven't made that case yet. So we'll see. Nick Robertson definitely has value around the league, and I would not be shocked if he is moved. But like I said, it's going to be an interesting scenario to watch here as training camps kind of finish up. A couple of notes on the Montreal Canadiens. One, there was a new article I come across today regarding David Savard. We know the veteran right-shot defenseman very likely is going to be moved at some point this year. A lot of the young Montreal defensemen are, up and coming, trying to take ice time away, trying to get more of opportunity for themselves. And, plus he's on a final year of his contract. And with all the depth they have there in the youth, it's expected that he could probably fetch them a decent return this year and will be moved sometime between now and the deadline. The article links him to 3 different teams, all in Canada, being Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Ottawa. Now, you could make Edmonton the case that their D has not been impressive so far in his preseason. I think it's a little early to hit the panic button. But for example, they brought in Josh Brown, and Josh Brown has been terrible so far for Edmonton. But I'm not sure what they were expecting, to be honest. He's not that good. He has, he's played in Arizona / Utah, Before this, he was in Ottawa briefly. Before, he's not been good. So I don't know why they went that route. They would have been better off trying to pay a little extra and keep Desharnais, in my opinion. So I can understand Edmonton right now is maybe not panicking, but seriously scratching their head going, maybe we need to make a move on D before it gets too late here. And Savard would be a prime candidate. We've already talked before about the links that they supposedly had interest in him anyhow. So one team to watch there. Another one, Winnipeg, of course, we know, had a really good season last year. They're certainly looking to, keep going with what they had last year and kind of see what they can do here. Obviously, they had some changes to their team. So it's difficult to say exactly how this team is going to be this year. Defensively, they're going to be a little different for sure. Brendan Dillon's gone. Nate Schmidt's gone. Could they use some more depth back there, especially with the injury to Heinola? He's going to be out for an extended time too. I can understand why they'd be linked. Ottawa right now, they're a little, maybe showing that they're a little thinner on the blue line than maybe that they would like to be. Right now, we don't know the long-term prognosis, but Artem Zub has not been practicing the last few days and is dealing with some sort of injury. If for some reason he was going to be out for any length of time, that's going to create a major hole in the top four. You're going to have to elevate guys like either Bernard Docker or Hamonic, and they're not really top four guys. Do they keep Carter Yakimchuk around out of who's likely going back to junior at some point to play a bit? I don't know. So a guy like Savard who comes with experience and could really solidify the defensive side of the game, shot blocking, penalty killing, could be an interesting option for them. But again, is Montreal going to want to help a division rival, someone who they're going to be competing with, trying to see if they can move up the standings, right? So, again, that's difficult to see, especially early in the year. Late in the year, it's different. If one team's out of it, one team's not. Sometimes that doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, it makes sense for all three teams to have interest in the player. I don't know that Montreal's in any kind of hurry. I don't think they are at all. I think they'd be quite content to keep Savard until the deadline at least. And, unless the offers are just too good that they think they're not going to do any better. So we'll see. The other Montreal note I want to talk about was Renaud Lavoie, of course, well-connected journalist, talking about Michael Pezzetta, and Pezzetta maybe being a player that might be at risk because of the youth and the prospects that have been playing well in camp. Like we talked about Dvorak maybe being in trouble because of the play level like Kapanen. Same goes for a guy like Pezzetta. Obviously the guys that are playing your bottom six center roles are the ones that are going to be, on the hook here. And, Pezzetta was probably already having a tough time to make the roster. But what Lavoie said was that, again, kind of like Robertson, feels he has trade value. So if Pezzetta were to go on waivers, he feels he'd be snatched up. Like they were playing New Jersey, of course, the other night. And again, he mentions that the Devils would love to see Pezzetta go on waivers. They'd probably snatch him up for sure, that he would be a player that they would want. So again, that he would have trade value. And before they get to the point in the preseason where they have to make those, tough decisions on those final cuts, Pezzetta might have a tough time to make this roster with the veteran and youth depth that they have in that forward group. There's a lot of options for Marty St. Louis and the Montreal Canadiens to put on the ice. And if Pezzetta is going to end up, getting cut, he's not going to end up, he's not going to clear waivers is what the consensus is here from Lavoie, and that a trade would be more likely, that he would have value to do that, and a team like New Jersey would be a team to watch. So again, we'll see. Montreal's got a lot of veterans, and they have a lot of youth, and the youth is pushing for spots, and this is going to force their hand to make a few tough decisions. And I mentioned before, it wouldn't be shocking at all to see a couple of players that are either veterans or at least kind of not rookies anymore, those in between guys like Pezzetta, that could be kind of forced out of a spot. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the preseason plays out. But Pezzetta could be a guy that's kind of on the bubble like Dvorak and could end up maybe losing a spot and be on the move before the end of training camps preseason and before the regular season starts. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.